The Shepnaz Podcast begins now.
Welcome to the Shepnaz Podcast. I'm Joe, and I'm your host today. And today I have with me a couple individuals that you'll know, Pastor Rob and Mike Fluhart. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the school and maybe some opportunities that you weren't aware that are available to you. And so welcome in, Pastor Rob.
Great, thank you. Good to be here. Good to have Mike Fluhart with us. Mike Fluhart as my SR, as my phone says, because there's a Mike Fluhart JR, but this is Mike Fluhart SR, who is the head of school for us. And one of the things that Mike is doing is working on creating some financial opportunities, some development ideas for the school financially, getting harder and harder to operate churches with just tithe money, harder and harder to operate schools with just tuition. And so you got to kind of be creative in creating different revenue streams. And we're going to talk today about a way that you can help us out, whether you have a kid that goes to the school or not. And it isn't really going to cost you any money, but it would really create a financial impact for the school that could be really helpful. And so we've asked Mike to come and be a part of that with us. So welcome, Mike. Thank you for joining us today.
Sure. Anytime I get the opportunity to talk about the school, I talk too much. So because it's a great thing. No, there's. I'm excited about what's going on in Christian education right now. Mm-hmm. We're coming. I'm almost 29th year in education. With 25 of it being in Christian education, and you've seen some peaks and valleys. We're back at that peak point. Mm-hmm. I think the election we just came through spoke volumes that people want something different.
Yeah.
They want some core values. Mm-hmm. One of the ways they're turning it is Christian education. Mm-hmm. As I meet with the other principals around the area, everybody's exploding.
Yeah.
And which is great.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of reasons for that. One thing, the expansion of Ed Choice, making it eligible for almost every family. Mm-hmm. But Ed Choice doesn't cover it all. Mm-hmm. It helps. It helps drastically.
So just to tell everybody, Ed Choice is when, if you take your kid to a private school or a Christian school or a private school, charter school, the money that the government would have paid the public school district follows your student to that private school. Sort of. It doesn't follow it directly, but yes. So anyway, the students that go here, if they qualify financially, their families, and the qualification level is like 400 times the poverty level.
450% above.
Almost everybody qualifies for some amount of Ed Choice. But even if you got the maximum amount of Ed Choice, it doesn't cover everything.
The tuition, right.
And then so what happens is you have a gap between what the government pays and then what the actual cost to educate the student is. And that's what this may be able to step in and help us out with.
That's exactly it. Because many of our families, we've got a broad range, a very diverse population in Shepherd. Mm-hmm. And I've got roughly 110 families that financially can't make up the difference. Mm-hmm. So I either have got to write that off or come up with other revenues. And we've partnered with the Ohio Central Education Network, which is a big
organization.
Ohio Christian that's Ohio Christian Education Network. Yeah. And they've set up what's called an SGO. And it's something that, it's a scholarship granting organization that it allows an individual to move their tax dollars. Like you had mentioned earlier, it doesn't cost any more money. Mm-hmm. It's a way that as you're doing your taxes between now and April 15th, if you owe state taxes, instead of paying all that to the government or to the state, you can take, if you're an individual, up to $750, or if you're a couple, up to $1,500. And instead of giving that money that you've got to give to the state anyway, you would give it to the SGO and then allocate it and hopefully pick us as your school of choice. And then those funds, I'm able to go in and go to my families that are in need and say, please apply for a scholarship.
Yeah.
And the scholarship, then they're awarded a portion of whatever I raise. and then that comes back to the school,
Okay.
and helps me offset the cost of tuition versus what Ed Choice or what other
the gap.
that gap.
Yeah.
As emphasized, it doesn't cost you anything. You're just reallocating your same tax dollars. You're just giving part of it to Christian education,
Yeah.
which we need Christian schools now more than ever. And then when you go to fill out your tax forms, there's a block right below the state tax line that's for SGOs, and you put in how much you donated, and you take that off your tax liability.
Okay, so
it's that simple.
So to try to make it really clear for me,
Yes.
So when I can pay, I would pay this $750 to the SGO now,
Right.
and then I would get the money back basically when I go to do my taxes, and I owe $750 to the state. It's state taxes, not federal taxes.
It's state taxes.
State taxes, and I would put in there that I paid $750 to this, and they would remove that liability, $750 liability that I owe them, and so I, in essence, get my money back.
Right.
So
Or it's the same money.
You got to kind of front it a little bit,
Right.
and then you get the money back when it comes to taxes that you don't have to pay the money that you gave in. So it's $750 per person.
Right.
So a married couple could do $1,500.
Yeah.
So if Monica and I wanted to do it, we would go to, you'll tell us how to do that, but we would pay OSINT $1,500 sometime between now and April 15th.
Yeah.
And then when our taxes get done, we would get a $1,500 tax credit for our state taxes.
Right.
And if we owed $1,500, we would get that off, and we would, so in essence, get your money back. So it doesn't cost a person really anything.
Right.
But it means that the school gets $1,500 to give to a student to make up the gap between what they get from Ed Choice and what it actually costs to educate a kid.
Exactly it.
Okay.
And you're really just moving your dollars. You're going to have to pay that state. Say if you owe the state $2,000.
Yeah.
You're going to have to write that check. Well, you're able to stop and say, no, I'm going to take $1,500, you're a married couple, and I'm putting that to Christian education.
Yeah.
So it's not costing you, and you're taking that off your tax form,
Yeah.
knocking your liability of what you owe the state
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah. Yep. So it's a win-win, right?
Right, it is.
I mean, it's huge. And what you said earlier, we have maybe 110 students who, and the
110 families.
110 families who
Yes.
are who rely on Ed Choice to come and wouldn't have the money to make up the gap between what they get and that. So let's say that
tuition.
gap is maybe $1,000. So that would be $110,000 that the school is basically in essence eating because they can't get that money from the students or
Right.
from the families. But this is a way to make that up. So it really puts all that money back in the budget. So if we had 110 families do it,
Right.
it would create, whatever 110 times 750 is, or 110 times
Yeah.
1,500 is, and it would be money that really doesn't cost anybody anything because you're going to spend it anyway, whether
Right.
you're giving it to the government or the school. And then, but it helps our school and our families be able to afford, and then we can make up the gap between what we get and what we need to educate the kids.
Right. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm sure as you're always enrolling, it seems like you're always enrolling, Mike.
Yes.
I mean, it's a continual process.
Enrollment never ends.
But I'm sure that for some families, like this would be the determining factor of whether or not they would be able to attend. We talk about the school like sometimes we'll just try to eat it if we can, the difference. But there comes a point where it's like we can't absorb anymore. And so
Right.
then as we're talking to new families, if we've already gotten to the point where we've absorbed as much as we possibly can, then it puts it on these families like you'll either have to come up with a difference or you won't be able to come.
That's it, and that's
exactly
a very point. Okay, and we have those families. I know we've talked about the 110 low income families, but we've got a number of middle income families that difference between tuition and what the state gives in Ed Choice makes a difference. So, I can think of one family. It's got a couple girls here. Husband's a local firefighter. And he makes a good wage, but she's a stay-at-home mom. Well, that wage alone with what our tuition is a challenge. Well, now I'm offering them a scholarship to help that local firefighter and that family continue their education in Christian education.
Yeah.
Well, and as you can see, probably some of those families that are kind of caught in the middle are the ones that are the most affected by it, because at the very low end of the pay scale, they probably get a lot more assistance in the first place.
Right.
And so then if you have people that are kind of middle income, they're wanting to have Christian education, they can't pay the full tuition. Maybe EdChoice is giving them a little bit of money to go towards it, but because of their income level, they're not getting as much support as maybe someone else would.
Right.
And then they have a bigger gap to take care of. And this would be one of those places where that bigger gap could really be filled.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why I appreciate what OSINT's doing, is just trying to provide another revenue source for Christian education. Because as Rob opened up with, we no longer can survive strictly on our tuition, because our tuition's nowhere near what a public school student.
Well, you'd have.
gets.
I mean, if you did, you'd have to charge a lot more than we do charge, and then you would lower the number of students that you have, so the school would be smaller.
Right.
And at the end of the day, the reason that we have a school is because it's a ministry arm of the church. It's an opportunity for us to invest in kids 7 or 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, as opposed to 1 hour on Wednesday or an hour on Sunday. It gives us that extra influence for the gospel.
Right.
And our teachers are Christians. They go to chapel. They have Bible classes. Everything that is taught to them is filtered from a Christian worldview. Yeah. And so we want more kids, not because we want to pat ourselves on the back, but because more kids means we have a broader influence on those kids. But the influence doesn't just stop with the kids. It also goes to their parents.
Parents, right.
Because their parents are helping them with the homework and reading this stuff and doing things. And but they've also chosen to bring their kids to a Christian school. So they want that influence as well. So yeah, we want to be able to reach as many as we can. Which, by the way, we're building a new building so we can do that.
Yes.
So, but we also have to pay for it.
I think we're going to do a whole nother episode talking about some of those updates.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk just a little bit about, as you were mentioning, the crossover, like this is a ministry.
Right.
Yes.
And on the one hand, it's very much ministry focused. Our mission here is to help people take their next steps towards Jesus. And that even means in their early education.
Yeah.
And the way we're trying to help provide a Christian-based education.
Yeah.
So we have been very intentional about there being some crossover. And I thought maybe a lot of people might not realize this, but if you could talk a little bit about how chapels are happening during the week and the involvement of Pastor Brianna and Pastor Brett.
That has been a blessing, because it's raised. We do have chapel once a week. I mean, yes, Bible's part of our curriculum, but then we have a dedicated day on Monday. Though we have two different chapels, one for the younger students and one for the older students. And with the partnership or the ministry of the church, Pastor Brianna, the youth pastor, and Pastor Brent have jumped in and done about 95% of our chapels. Well, then what that does, and what's exciting, and it's rough to gauge, but like Pastor Brent, most mornings is out with the car pickup. Well, now you're starting to see kids that don't know him come up and give him a hug.
Yeah.
And then you're having parents and grandparents see that is it's more than a partnership. We've raised the level of our chapels, the quality of our chapels, but we've also raised the synergy between the church and the school, and I know now when kids are struggling, and I've seen it, they ask, can I talk to Pastor Brent? Can I talk to Pastor Brianna? Because they've got something going on in their lives. Or the parents will say, do you got a minister here they could talk to? Well, yeah, we do. Yeah. And the kids already know them. So that you've got that relationship ability to lead more people to Christ is expanding tenfold because of that partnership. And if I could tell one little story that I just heard about, and that shows where this partnership's going. Right after Thanksgiving, I had one of the grandparents come up to me, and how can I put it? A little bit of rougher grandparent.
Really?
The little bit more of a secular household.
Okay.
But they had chosen to send their granddaughter to a Christian education. Thanksgiving meal, everybody's sitting down, and the little girl goes, and she's second, third grade, younger, goes, "Grandma, we got to stop." And she made everybody pray over the Thanksgiving meal. That grandmother that, like I said, I don't know where her beliefs are. I won't judge her. Came and said, "Thank you. This is what Christian education, why I sent my granddaughter here."
Yeah.
Because she witnessed to 15 family members.
Yeah. That's awesome.
But that's because of Brent and because of Brianna and because of the partnership.
Well, and we always are working on the partnership that gets better and stronger, but you have great teachers and staff that love the Lord and are instilling those values in the kids every day in the classroom too. So it's good. What God's doing on our campus here is pretty amazing, and we're excited about it. And this is just a way for you to be a part of it, and it really doesn't cost you anything. I mean, you got to front the money, but you're going to pay it anyway. So if you can do that, making that sacrifice, that's really the only sacrifice is you got to front it. But it helps us to be able to minister to families like what you were talking about, and more. So yeah, we're excited about that. You'll hear a lot more about this in the future, but we wanted to kind of get the nuts and bolts out in the podcast so you could know what was going on.
If you'd hand me that, I'm going to go ahead and read off the address here. We're going to put the link on the screen and also in the show notes, depending on whether you're listening to it or watching it. Also, we'll put a QR code, but I realize most of you are listening this to on your phone. It's kind of hard to scan a QR code with your phone when it's on your phone. But the link is sgo.ocen.org. Let me read that to you again. It's sgo.ocen.org. sgo.ocen.org. And we'll make sure that you have a link to that, and we will put the QR code in case somebody's watching on TV. They can scan it with their phone.
And then when you go to that website, you need to pick our school.
Yeah, pick our school.
There'll be a list of a lot of schools because they're doing this. All Christian schools are trying to do it. So pick Shepherd Christian School.
We would really appreciate that.
Shepherd Christian School.
We would really appreciate that. All right. Well, guys, I appreciate you coming in, Mike.
Thank
especially in the middle of this break around Christmas and New Year when actually everybody else is gone. But thank you for coming in. We are not tax attorneys or anything like that. So, of course, if you have questions about that, consult those. But also check out everything that's going on with the church by going to shepnaz.org. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. For Pastor Rob and Mike, I'm Joe. Have a great day. This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.